Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another virtual wine tasting with WineClick. Today, we are presenting the wines of Glenelly Estate from South Africa. This winery is started by Madame May Longerson. Well, I think all of us would have known her name, whether in the magazine, whether drinking a bottle of wine in our journey to wines. Her name is synonymous with Chateau Pichon Lalonde. And many of us will have met her, and she will be with her dog and managing a beautiful property, big personality. Well, I think it must be about 8 or 9 years ago, after the sale of a family border property, she started a new chapter in South Africa and created Glenelly Estate. And about a year ago, I've got the opportunity to be introduced to this wine. I wrote an email, picked up the phone, called Leah, and there we are. We are blessed to be representing Glenelly Estate, and we're very happy to have Miss Leah Jones. She's the export manager. And so without further ado, I think I'll leave her to unravel the story for you. Leah, over to you, please.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Leah. I'm the export manager for Glenelly. So today I'm going to talk you through our story, mainly the story of Maid Langzin. And the way I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna do a small presentation on the vineyard. We're gonna include few videos as well, so I can really pictures or send you picture, and you can really immerse yourself into the winery. And you know, please be dry and start drinking if you feel like it, and start to immerse yourself in the wine. And then when I finish with the 20-25 minute presentation, then we'll go properly through all the wine that you've got in front of you, and it's very exciting because you do have a vertical of Lady May today, and you know there is no Lady May available, no Lady May 2008 available anywhere else in the world. So you are very, very much treated today. So let me start the presentation. So the first video is very short one. It's 1 or 2 minutes, so you can actually see Maid Langzin and have the picture of the winery. So I'm just going to start with this.
When I think of Glenelly, I think of the beautiful landscape that we have here, but I think first about my staff. It's more of a family life that we're sharing, more than a business. I don't consider Glenelly like a business.
Glenelly covers 123 hectares, of which 57 hectares planted under vine. The rest of our land is devoted to olive trees, fynbos, and other indigenous plants found only in the Cape. We follow a biodiversity approach as the agricultural sector depends on the sustainability. These farming methods should protect the long-term productivity of the land to ensure ongoing productive agricultural systems.
In line with our approach to the environment, we also have a philosophical view on our approach to winemaking. We try and do everything as natural as possible in the winemaking process. So I took the opportunity when we built this new building to use natural yeast, the yeast that is in the air and in the environment and on the bunches, to do the fermentation process. I believe it gives the wines a different texture, a unique texture, and it also ties back that our philosophy is to express as much of the vintage and the terroir of the property as possible.
here was the little video of introduction. So you've got an overview of how the winery looks like. So normally I would also go through, you know, the history of South Africa. But I think today is going to be too short. So I'm just going to give a brief overview and some reminder date. South Africa, really, the wine in South Africa started in 1652 when the Dutch East India Company started a refreshment station, because Cape Town was a main port of exports and import still today. And of course, they started this way, and then they were Dutch, but they thought, you know, since we now have people staying over, let's maybe start to plant some wine and vine and see how it goes. So in 1979, the first wine was made in South Africa, and that's from a very famous estate called Constantia, so Klein Constantia today. And then, of course, the big thing a few years later is in 1685, we also in South Africa had the French Huguenots coming through and bringing their knowledge, coming from Bordeaux, coming from Burgundy. And so I like to think that as much as we are a New World country, you know, we are the oldest of the New World country. The only difference is up until the apartheid, up until the election of Nelson Mandela in 1994, only one winery was able to, the cooperative, the KWV, was exporting wine in the rest of the world, but no one else did. So really the opening of South Africa as a whole really happened after 94. And then, of course, investment properly into vineyard happened after the years 2000. So yes, that's the brief history. And of course, I can't, you know, overlook that in 1925, you had Professor Perold that started the Pinotage grape with the hybrid of Cinsault and Pinot Noir, but you know, this is not what we do at all, and I will explain why a little bit later. So with our history, if we look at the history of Glenelly, first of all, people always ask us about the name Glenelly, where it's coming from. And you know, the dates that you've got on this slide is the furthest date that we have been able to go back to 1682. So we know that Simon van der Stil, which was the person that started vine in South Africa, owned the land and then gave the land to François Fillon, a French Huguenot, in 1682. So actually, Glenelly, from the beginning, from 1682, was planted with vineyard. However, after Phylloxera, the vines were not replanted. And then we had a famous family called the Garlic family that owned the vineyard and actually made it just a fruit farm. So it was only fruit. And the Garlic family was the equivalent of the, you know, the Harrods family in South Africa. So they had big department store in Cape Town, and this was their fruit farm. And of course, that's how we leave it for now. We'll come back to when Medlangsin discovered the vineyard, but that was a fruit farm. Then we come back to Medlangsin herself. So today she's 96 years old. You know, I think I'm not shy to say the age, because you know, she's absolutely incredible. She works every day. She works on her book at the moment, and she's very much an inspirational woman. She was born in 1925 in France, in Bordeaux, in one of the most famous family in Bordeaux called the Mialais. And the Mialais were famous to own Palmer, Siran, Ducru Bocaillou. And the same year as she was born, her father and her uncle acquired Pichon. So at the time, Pichon was just one estate. It was not Pichon Baron and Pichon Comtesse, but it was one estate. And so she grew up really, you know, in some of the best chateaux in Bordeaux. However, herself, Later on, she married Captain Hervé de Langzin, and you know, he's a military. So she always say, you know, when you are a wife of someone in the army, you just follow him around. So for 30 years, she just followed him around in different area where he was posted, and she later on lived for quite a while in America as well. And then in 1978, she inherited from Chateau Pichon. So at the time, she's already 53. And what is really commendable is that, you know, she restarted school and she restarted to everything to take over the winery properly, because, you know, she was a mother, she was a wife, and as much as she grew up in the wine business, you know, it wasn't, you know, something that she did every day. So she restarted everything in Bordeaux, and you know, a few later on, Pichon became a super second growth. So Pichon was a second growth, but it was named super second growth because she really elevated the vineyard. And of course, she overlooked some of the best vintage, 82, 80, 83, 89, and you know, that was really some of the best time of Pichon. She also stumbled across a manuscript from her family where it was a manuscript of geology, and the possibility of South Africa already 50 years before her was highlighted on this manuscript. And she thought, you know, I really must go to South Africa and see what's going on there. And this was really coming into her mind. But also something else happened. In the 90s, she was the president of the IWSC, and she decided to, you know, put together a trophy for the best Bordeaux blend. And quite often, the people who would win the best Bordeaux blend between the 90s and the 2000s were South African. So from this on, as soon as the apartheid was finished, after 94, she decided to visit South Africa and to try to find the perfect area. It's only in 2003, at the age of 78, that she will discover Glenelly. And the first impression, and you will see on some of the picture, is, you know, it's an amphitheater. So when you look at an amphitheater, you think, okay, amphitheater will be planted in different area, but also we will have different exposure, and you can have different exposure on the same grape, meaning that you can have a lot of components to do, you know, the blend that you wish to have. And you know, she just took a look at once and she said, if it's good enough for this fruit farm, it will be good enough for me. Also, normally everyone in Stellenbosch, and I will come back to exactly where we are located, but everyone in Stellenbosch is located behind a mountain called Simonsberg. So their exposure will be west exposure, where we are east exposure. So we really do get the light, but not necessarily the heat, unlike most of our neighbors. Also, we actually don't have any neighbors. There is only one farm next to us, but being an amphitheater and protected by a mountain, we don't have any neighbors. And on the long run, we always wanted to be organic. And so that was also very important. So here we are in 2003, we discovered Glenelly. As we discover it, she also discovered that then the first person who actually owned was a French Huguenot, and then he made some wine. So she's like, "Bango, I'm gonna buy this vineyard." Of course, she then sent the whole team of Pichon to do some soil analysis and to see if everything is okay. And it's a strike, so we plant our first vine in 2004. So there is a mistake. We don't have 60 hectares. We've got 57 hectares. Actually, in 2007, she thought, I want to dedicate everything that I've got to Glenelly. She also had a modern vision and to really work with sustainability in mind. So, Glenelly is not the most beautiful winery you know, Pichon, but it's something super modern, hyper modern, that has cutting edge technology, and that is work with sustainability in mind. So 2007, she sold Pichon. And then we also have our winemaker, Luc, that joined us and then make the first vintage in 2008. Not everything was from our fruit, and I will explain to you as well when we try Lady May 2008 how we managed through this. And then of course today she's 96. And she managed Glenelly with her grandson, Nicolas Bureau, which used to be in my place. And when he moved to South Africa, I took his place. So, so Nicolas, I will put a few videos of Nicolas as well throughout the presentation, so you can meet the man, and Luc, our winemaker. So that's for our history. I don't know if Alice, the questions are for completely the end, or is there any question already from anybody regarding the history?
No question on the chat group at the moment. Yeah, so I think the audience are pretty happy with the history.
Okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you give me big sign, because I've got you in on the main screen, so you can give me.
We will. Our team, yeah, our team will stop you and post the question up.
Thank you. So this is Nick. I'm just gonna play the video. So it's just a quick introduction of him, and also it's nice to see. This was yesterday, so you can see it was a bit overcast, but we are entering the end of the flowering season now.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Bureau. I'm the 8th generation of my family to work in the wine trade. This is Glenelly Estate. We're super excited to be working with you in Singapore with Wine Clique. This estate was established by my grandmother in 2003, Méliane de Langzin, when she was still running the very famous chateau in Bordeaux called Pichon-Longueville, Comtesse de la Lande. Here we are in our Chardonnay block, but we, as you will know by now, we're mainly a red wine producer, but we also produce the 2 kinds of Chardonnay. And here we can see that, you know, the bunches are nicely formed, and we're about a month and a half away from a harvest. So enjoy your tasting, and we hope to have the pleasure of welcoming you here at Glenelly in 2022.
So the location, so as I mentioned to you, we are in Stellenbosch. Now, you know, I'm just gonna go through a quick round of South Africa. So South Africa is 110,000 hectare planted, and to give you an idea, that's the size of Bordeaux. So the whole Cape is the size of Bordeaux. Now you only make wine in the Cape, not further than this, because then, you know, you've got humidity, and obviously that's not working. As soon as you enter the Indian Ocean, then that's not working. So the Cape is the best place to make wine. However, there are different locations in the Cape. So when you have Cape Town, on the top of Cape Town, north, about an hour and a half driving, you've got the Swartland. The Swartland is very arid, it's very dry, and, you know, sometimes when you drive from Stellenbosch to the Swartland, the same day you've got 10-degree difference. So it's very dry and arid area, and it's a bit your equivalent of the Rhone Valley kind of area, except without the steepness of the slope. So that's one kind of area. Then on the east side of Cape Town, you've got Franschhoek and Stellenbosch, and that will be more of your oldest winery, and, you know, more of your Bordeaux blend, quite famous winery. And then you also have some Pinotage, Chenin Blanc, but Pinotage and Chenin Blanc are also found in the Swartland, so depend on the style that you're looking for. Then completely on the south of Cape Town, you've got the southern tip of Africa, and this is where Constantia is, and that would be more your white wine, Sauvignon Blanc. You know, you've got the sea next to surrounding, so, you know, that's the perfect area to make Sauvignon Blanc. And then a little bit further on the east side, in the mountain but overlooking the sea, you've got the Emmenelard Valley, and that will be your Burgundy of South Africa with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So that's why I always say, you know, South Africa is not about Chenin Blanc and Pinotage only, and it's almost the equivalent of driving in Italy, Spain, and France in a sort of 3 hours rounds, with really much microclimate, temperature difference, different soil. You know, the Cape has the oldest soil in the world. So really the wine are very different every 15 minutes than you're driving. So for us, we are in Stellenbosch. We are the closest winery to town, and we are located in what is called the Ida Valley. And as I mentioned previously, you see the mountain on this picture. That's the Simonsberg mountain. So we are on one side, but most of all the other winery will be on the other side of this mountain. Then in terms of planting, we've got 123 hectares of land. And of course, the planting is 57 hectares, 58 hectares. And what we plant the most will be Cabernet Sauvignon, followed by Syrah, Merlot, Petit Verdot, Cabernet Franc. And then, you know, Médlangsin always wanted to plant Chardonnay, and of course in Bordeaux we don't really plant Chardonnay, or anyway if you do, you know, you're not putting it under any appellation. So she said, I really want to plant Chardonnay, so we did this. However, we have been a bit a victim of our success because now Chardonnay is on allocation, so we are looking at replanting, but I think before we up the level of Chardonnay, it will be another 6-7 years. And then, of course, the rest of our land is devoted to biodiversity. We've got animals, we've got cows, we've got all kind of animal, wild animal around. And because we are minimum intervention, that's attracting the animals. So we believe that, you know, if the animals are on our land, dying on our land, and, you know, the land is richer, so it's a full circle of life. And of course, we have a conservation of fynbos. Fynbos is the oldest flower in the world, and you can only find it in the Cape today. So we do have fynbos on the land as well. Then in terms of the soil, so the soil is called the Oak Cliff, where we are, and it's a composition of clay on the top and granite on the bottom, and you know, it's quite unusual, but it's perfect for us because, of course, as you know, you will find in Pauillac, you need this gravelly soil for the drainage, but also in South Africa, specifically since 2018, you know, there is a water shortage. It's very dry, and so the fact that we've got the clay, you have this water, this extra water retention that, you know, really deliver the water as the vine needs it. So for us, it's very important to have this kind of soil. And we also have an irrigation system, but I will come back to the irrigation system and how we use it. It's a drip irrigation. And again, I think, you know, in South Africa, you need to be super careful about the water because it's really in shortage. So we're not using, you know, the irrigation just, you know, crazily. Actually, we're using irrigation after the harvest. Because quite often, you know, it's a bit like yourself. If you run the marathon, you know, you're not going to drink lots of water while you're running because otherwise you're not going to feel too well, but you will need hydration after the effort. So after the harvest, this is when usually we irrigate, and then, you know, just to give this extra oomph to the vine. And of course, the climate, again, I speak all the time about the climate in South Africa. They're different everywhere. As a whole, South Africa is a Mediterranean climate. You know, the exposure that you see on this picture, if you go just straight through, you do have the sea. And of course, for us, the sea acts as a natural air conditioning. So as much as it's an hour and a half away, you do have this breeze coming through, and this is our natural air conditioning. So, I would say on growing season, it's really rare to go above 30 degrees. You can have 30 degrees, but it's really rare that we will go above 30 degrees on growing season. We have east exposure for most of our Cabernet. And again, it's all about getting the light the morning, but not the sunburn the afternoon. And then, I've spoke already about the amphitheater. So we are in slope, and the fact that we have all the grape planted as an amphitheater, you do have different exposure. And so when we do the harvest, we make sure that each parcel is harvested individually and also fermented individually. So we do have a maximum of composition to make our blends. And then north to south row planting. So yes, when we look at the row, they're not this way, but they will be this way because we have a lot of wind. And so if they will be on the other way, we will have the wind breaking the vineyard. So high density planting, I always love because, originally I come from Burgundy myself, and, in a wine family. And I always say to look that, 4,000 hectares is not high density for me because we go up to 8,000 or 9,000, but yes, it is a high density for some of the Cabernet. Again, I always like to say that the high density is used to really put competition to the vine, but it's not high density, because I think people have a lot of the picture in their head, then high density is not quality. But let's not forget that with a certain soil, and especially with a soil that is made of clay, you need to create a competition for your vine, so you need to plant in high density. And then our viticulture approach. So we've got a viticulturist, Heinrich, which has been with us from the beginning, and we've got our winemaker, Luc. In 2018, we started with few blocks to be organic, or to really look at organic. And since 2019, we are 100% organic. So we are in conversion. But what we have learned also in the last few years is that, for organic, you have one chart for the US, one chart for Europe, one chart for China. So all the charts are very different. And, not all the charts require the same thing. So we're trying to be at the highest level, but equally in most of the chart, for instance, you can use copper. And, we all know that if you use copper in 50 years, you won't be able to plant anything. And to leave anything to our grandchildren. So, we are looking at various things, but for us, the word that we like to use is sustainability. We want to really lessen our impact on the surrounding world. And organic is the conversion, but it may not be the end goal as we see it, because we're not agreeing with everything that we see at the moment. So it's something we work on it, but we absolutely love it. It does come with a lot of work because not everything works in your favor. And of course, you learn properly that Mother Nature is stronger than you in a lot of cases. So organic is a big thing to take on, and it's more staff, more dedication, and you need to be there all the time. And of course, it's without saying, I put this on the slide, but harvesting at optimum physiological ripeness is everything to make good wine. Then we've got Luc. So Luc is, our gentle giant. He's never panicking, whatever it is, even when it's raining a day before harvest. Luc has worked in some of the best winery in the world. He worked at Chateau Angelus. He worked at Screaming Eagle. He worked with all the best winemaker in South Africa. And I always say, winemaker in South Africa, what is, for me, the big attraction with winemaker in South Africa is because they are in a southern hemisphere. They have the opportunity travel to the northern hemisphere during harvest. So they can choose 1 year to go to the US, they can choose 1 year to go to France, they can choose the other year to go somewhere else, and in between maybe to go to Australia. So they are very well traveled, and because they don't know how good they are, they try to always over, deliver, where, I think with French people, it's all about, well, we've done this for quite a while, so let us do our thing. But, I think South African winemakers are always striving for something new, something better, something else. So yes, Luc has been with us from day one, and of course for him his thing is all about having as many components. So we constantly do things with various barrel. We even at the moment we're not looking at it, but we have ordered some American barrel to see what it can bring to the party. No acidification, wild yeast, and of course, again, individual block fermentation to have as many components. So I'm going to play you 2 videos of Luc so you can see different parts of the winery. It's not as glamorous as on these pictures, I need to tell you, because he did this yesterday. But here's Luc. So I'm going to just play this first video and then the next one.
Hi there, I'm Luc, the winemaker at Glenelly Estate, and you're joining us in our beautiful tank room. I'm just going to speak briefly about our philosophy about winemaking on the property, because we use these wonderful tanks for our fermentations, but our philosophy is to do things as naturally as possible. So all our fermentations that we run are spontaneous ferments. We rely on the natural yeast and everything in the environment around us to do our fermentations, and we do our best not to do any additions like acidification or anything like that. We rely on the natural balance that is reflected from the vineyard coming through in our wines, ultimately to express themselves as best as possible.
And I'm going to go through the other in our barrel aging cellar.
Hi there, now you're joining me down in our barrel cellar. This is our first year aging cellar. You can see behind me we've got all our 300-litre French oak barrels that we use for aging our red wines in. We use 500-litre oak casks for our Chardonnays, a little bit bigger format to reduce that wood to wine ratio. But over here, we've also started to introduce the use of ubras into our winemaking philosophy to also increase that fruit expression of the wine coming through by reducing the wood impact on the varietals.
Here we go. So now when I speak about the winery, so as you can see, it is not the most again, it doesn't look like Pichon, but it's very well integrated in the environment. And since this picture, actually, we have leaf all around it, so it's actually green, and it's really like if it was coming from the ground. And there are 5 levels. You can only see 3 levels, and so it is a natural flow, and so everything is 1 level, then the next level, then the next level. So we work with natural gravity flow, and when the grape are arriving, they will be dealt with on the top floor, and then all the juice will come straight down to the tank that you've seen. So that's 1 level. It's the second level then you see from the top, and then on the 3rd level you've got the barrel, and then underneath you've got everything that is bottling, and then on the very last one it will be all our preparation and packaging. It doesn't look like it, but it's super impressive because it's all glass, and I think Maître Langzin really wanted to bring. When you walk in a cellar, you don't have any vision of the outside world until you come out of the cellar. And she really wanted the well-being of the staff, and for the staff to be able to see outside and going through the light. So it's a UV protected, but you as a staff member, you can see outside, and you've got the beautiful view of the amphitheaters. Also, concrete was the choice because, again, concrete leaves you with a natural we don't need any air conditioning. So again, we don't need any electricity for this part because we have no air conditioning. We've got water running through a sort of serpentine in between the concrete, and that keeps the concrete always cold and at a certain temperature. And of course, as you go down, there is less exposure, and so it will be colder and colder and colder. And then of course we have solar panel on the top of the winery. We recycle all our waste, and I don't like to bang on too much on this because I think everyone is it is one of our USP, but I think everyone is looking at doing something more sustainable and different. So yes, everyone is doing their bit, and we see it more and more. So and specifically in South Africa. And then our range, just before, I know everyone is thirsty by now. So our range, we've got 3 range. One is called the glass collection. I believe you may have a bottle in front of you. So the glass collection will have glass on the bottle. So I'm just going to show you. Here we go. And usually it's mostly the celebration of our single varietal, and all of it are, I mean, for this kind, it's our first price, it's our entry-level wine, but still you do have 12 months aging on those wines. So I think, it's pretty good for an entry level to have 12 months aging. And again, glass collection is after the big passion of Maid Langzin. We have the biggest glass collection in the world. We have a museum at the winery, and she believed that glass is like wine. It starts from nothing and then it's enhanced from the human touch. So that's for the glass collection. The Estate Reserve, I'm going to explain a little bit more about the Estate Reserve, but it's our medium category of wine, super good value for money. Again, we're going to try the white and the red, so I will come back to this. And then Our Lady May, which is our flagship, which is on allocation, and it's basically your second gross at a third of a price. So, go for it if you can and if you have the chance. So let's start with the tasting. Yes, I don't know if I've mentioned it because I think I've mentioned it already to Alice. So today I'm not gonna test with you because sadly I had COVID 3 weeks ago, and I'm not quite recovered with the taste element. So I don't want to just open all those bottles and not taste anything. But tasting is very subjective, so trust your instinct, as you know.
Okay, sorry, Leah.
Yes.
Excuse me, before we go to the tasting, there is one question in the chat box, and it's coming from Nimi. So Nimi asked, hi, Leah, do you hand harvest or mechanical harvest? The 4,000 vine per hectare should allow mechanical.
Yes, but in South Africa, very little people. Hello, Mimi, first of all, thank you for your question. So in South Africa, in general, people don't really use mechanical harvesting. So mostly all of the vineyards are hand harvested. So for us, it's the case as well. And also, as you know, South Africa is a country where people need walks. And so whenever you can, you need to create, a position. So it's important for people to walk. And so therefore, that is why it's easy to hand harvest, because we need to create employment as much as possible. But for us, also, it is quite steep. So we wouldn't allow mechanical harvest, and we will never do a mechanical harvest. So I'm just gonna, is that it? Sorry, Emerson, sorry.
Yes, we can start the tasting now.
I hope I answer the question. So with the Estate Reserve, for both the red and the white, obviously it's called Estate. So all of the grape are coming from our vineyards. Sometimes with the glass collection, to supplement the demand of our market, we will buy some grape in or some wine, but it has become increasingly difficult for us to buy because, we want to be organic. We want to still, even on the glass collection, have the appellation Stellenbosch. So, you know, we can't just buy from anywhere. And, you know, our buying is always just a blind tender. So we will never know from who we buy, and the people from who we're buying, they don't know where it's going. But, you know, it's becoming very increasingly difficult to buy anything because of our high standard for quality. So with the estate reserve, everything comes from our own vineyard. We produce around 40,000 bottles a year, and everything is pretty much gone as we make it because it's on allocation. We do have a really, really great following in America. And last year on, I think it was Wine Search, it was elected the best value for money wine in the world. So, and we didn't expect this at all. And this on, you know, everyone was looking to have this wine. So to come back to how we make this wine, it's so always hand harvested, and then we have a whole bunch press. Of course, that facilitates the drainage, and then after this, the fermentation and the malolactic happen in barrel. So we move everything as soon as it's pressed in barrel. Some people do the first fermentation in tank, and then they will move for the malolactic in barrel, but we will move everything straight as it's pressed. So everything happens in the barrel. In terms of the barrel, we use 500 liters rather than 300 liters. So when you saw Luc and the barrel behind him, those are 300 liters, and we will use those one for the red. But our choice for the Chardonnay, because we don't want to have something overpowering, is a bigger barrel. So the ratio to wine is a little bit softer. If you were going for a smaller barrel, you will have a little bit more oak, and we don't want this over oak wine. And then on this slide, so the vintage that you've got 2020, it's not 9 months, but it's 10 months surely. And then we give another, once we bottle, we try to give a sort of 4 or 5 months rest, but it is becoming increasingly difficult. So to give you an example of our problem this year, so normally we would have bottle 2021, like about now, October, November, more October than November. But of course, with all the problem with shipment that everyone has at the moment, we didn't have any bottle to bottle into because we order our bottle in Europe. And what it means for us, it was a lot of pressure because when you don't have the bottle, you kind of start to panic because our harvest is in 1.5 months, and then you've got all your order for Christmas coming at the same time, and it's the same team. So luckily our bottle arrived about 3 weeks ago. So the noise that you could hear behind Luc was the bottling machine. So yeah, then we bottle and we try to leave 4 months, but we are already out of stock of 2020. So it means that we will try to leave settle in bottle for 4 months until February, March, and then it will be on the market probably around April, the next vintage. So I don't know what you think, you know, about the wine. As I say, it's always subjective, but what we're really trying to do with the estate reserve is have something with, you know, vivid minerality, have really the minerality come through, and, you know, there's, yes, oak coming through, but really through a short cross pastry, you know, something not over oaky. And, you know, this is what we're trying to achieve here. We're not pretending to make, of course, when we explain to the end consumer, we refer ourselves as South Burgundian style, but we're not pretending to make anything near, you know, South Burgundian style, but this is the style, you know, it's your oak Chardonnay with the high acidity and a little bit of barrel. This wine can definitely age, you know, you can definitely age this for another 10 years before it reaches its peak, and, you know, then you lose the acidity. So I think there is no point to age it too much further. And our policy with oak as well, I forgot to say, but our policy with the Chardonnay is usually 20% new oak. So we don't go over more than 20% new oak, because again, otherwise you just overpowering the oak on this Chardonnay. So I think that's it for the estate reserve. I don't know if there are any questions.
Yes, there is one question, and it's coming from Annette Scarf. And the question is, which clones are used in the estate Chardonnay?
Which, sorry?
Which clones are used?
So we're using Dijon clone.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. That's it. And because, you know, we wanted to do something super simple, we just didn't know that, you know, we would. So with the Dijon clone, you have up to 5 declination, but we didn't want to do more than this because we didn't think that our Chardonnay will take off. So again, but we may reassess this when we will do the replanting, because Chardonnay is pretty tough. It's, you know, to get it right is one of the toughest grape. So we will reassess then this, and also our crafting, and whether or not we use nursery from South Africa, because then the nursery from South Africa have things which are more apt to where we are. So the first time around, yes, we used Dijon clone, and everything was clone imported. But we will see on the replanting.
Thank you, Leah. Well, I guess my own opinions about the wine. Okay, maybe Annette was the one that asked you the questions regarding the clone. So I thought maybe I will seek her expertise. Annette is the master of wine. So I will seek her expertise to share some insights on the tasting experience. Annette, do you think I could trouble you to unmute yourself so we could have a nice conversation about the wines?
I've just done that. Okay, so
thank you, Annette.
Thank you very much, Leah, and welcome everybody. So I think this wine displays really lovely ripe fruit, lovely tropical fruit spectrum on there of ripe stone fruit. I like the way you've managed the oak. The oak is very nicely integrated into the wine, so it's more framing the wine rather than sitting on top of the wine. And so I think it's a very successful blend on there. So I would say, you know, well done on that. The acidity is quite in balance as well. So all in all, it's a wine that can be drunk now, but certainly one, as you say, that continues to age, and one that can be had just as an aperitif on its own, or obviously matched with food, because you've got some of the lovely creamy notes that you're coming through from the oak. You're getting a little bit of oak spice, but which gives it more pairing options as well. So, but really lovely fruit. The fruit is very fresh and pure.
Thank you so much, Annette. And yeah, well, I'm very delighted of your comment, because it's exactly where we are trying to be. This kind of peachy and tropical fruit is really what we're trying to achieve. And of course, it's easy because yes, the temperature is higher than you know, Burgundy to get those fruit. But then again, the frame of the oak rather than, you know, the overpowering.
Thank you, Annette. I think it's quite a general opinion that, you know, the wine is very well balanced, it's very well made. It's like it's 2020. You taste that complexity in a wine, and you feel that it has a good potential to age.
Yeah. And of course, you know, when we talk about 2020, because people sometimes forget, but we do our harvest in January, so it is 9 months older already than, you know, your European harvest, because sometimes when we release you know, the 2021, soon people will be like, oh wow, that was last year, but it's not. It's, you know, it's already 18 months for us. So also, you know, bear in mind that this kind of things. Now, if I go to the Estate Reserve Red, so again, you know, here all of the fruits are coming from us, the blend obviously differ depending on the year. So with the 2015, I think it was 35% Cabernet Sauvignon, and then 30% Merlot, 15% Syrah, 10% Cabernet Franc, and 10% Petit Verdot. Sometimes we don't have Petit Verdot, sometimes we don't have some Cabernet Franc, depend on the year. But one of the big USP of this wine is the Syrah. The reason why the big USP of this wine is the Syrah is because Médelancin really wanted to give a nod to the Syrah in Bordeaux. And actually very few people remember or know that Syrah was used in Bordeaux blend pre-phylloxera. So the two reasons why, you know, Bordeaux didn't keep Syrah is A, because after phylloxera, they just decided that, you know, they would not replant it, but also with the apparition of the appellation starting and the classification, they also decided that, you know, Syrah was not something that would be put in blend. However, many winemakers from Bordeaux used to drive in the south of France or in the Rhône and you know, bring some barrel and just add the Syrah themselves to the blend. And it was always like a secret. In the 60s, it's very famous as well than estate in the 60s would add the Syrah, because in the 60s, you know, a lot of vintage were not that great. So to give some oomph to the wine, let's add some Syrah and give this oomph to the wine. And also, let's not forget that, you know, Bordeaux was the first place to really export to wine in barrel. And so again, the Syrah was added just to keep together the wine, to really give this oomph and be the frame. So Médelancin really wanted to do this blend where she said, okay, let's not hide ourselves from the truth here. Syrah is a really good it's not because we're adding Syrah that it's not a proper Bordeaux. Actually, the opposite way. This is the way Bordeaux was supposed to be made. And you know, when you taste the wine, yes, you do have this Bordeaux blend, and then you do have, it's all about the fruit. It's fruit, and I think this is really coming from the Syrah. But you do have also those undertone of cigar box and leatheriness and you know, black pepper that, you know, you will find. And one of the biggest thing as well for us, a little bit like in the Rhône Valley, we've got blue gum trees and we've got lots of herbs around the vineyard, and I think a little bit that what you will have in the Rhône Valley, where they describe some of the taste as the garrigue, the dry herbs, it's definitely there, and the Cabernet Sauvignon really sucked this up very well. So you do find those things, and then a bit of plum. So that's for really the description of the wine and the story of the wine. Now, how do we make the wine? So it is hand sorted. So it's only few parcels, like the Lady May, but to another extent. I'll talk about the Lady May a bit later, but only few parcel. The best parcel will go in a estate reserve, and then it is hand sorted, so the best grape will go there. We will do a gentle crush, and then it will stay in stainless steel, have a cold soak for a few days before we do some pump over and leave it for 3 weeks on skin contact. And then we will move once the fermentation is done, we'll move it into 300 liters barrel, the one that you've seen. We move it to 300 liters barrel for about 18 months. The malolactic will happen, and then we will have 18 months aging. After this, we will bottle it, and you will still have another at least 18 months bottle aging. So this is also a really big USP for Glenelly. We like to do some bottle aging for the Estate Reserve and the Lady May before we send it on the market. We are conscious that not everyone can age wine anymore. So we want to try to present the wine as its best. You know, we don't just want to present the wine from the next harvest when it's not ready. So we feel like 2015 is ready. 2015 was a textbook vintage. Again, I will come back to the vintage when we are a bit more vintage specific with the Lady May, but it was a textbook vintage, and it's all about the fruit. It's very exuberant. And, you know, it's probably one of our best vintage so far with 2017, which is not on the market yet. So again, I think for people that look for an amazing value for money Bordeaux blend, this is it. For people who want to drink it now, this is the one that you should have. also, if you want to still age it, this one easily will age for another 10 years, 10, 15 years. But it's not like the Lady May is really the wine to collect and age if you want. This one is just a really good value for money wine. And I always say, when I don't know what people drink, and I've got a party at home and I'm not too sure what their style is, if they are in a wine business, if they're not in a wine business, men and women, it's always a bit, this is the wine that just please everyone. And you can easily, what we do, we in summer, we're not shy to putting it in an ice bucket for 10 minutes and have it quite cool, because we don't think that's going to break the wine at all. But if it's hot outside, put it in an ice bucket for 10 minutes and have it more at a sort of 15 degrees Celsius temperature kind of wine.
Annette, would you like to share some insights regarding the taste palettes?
Yeah, sure. And so I would say actually the Syrah in the blend is you can definitely taste the Syrah. You can get that sort of black pepper and red fruit, but it's a shame it's been disallowed in Bordeaux since the 1935, because Syrah adds that upfront fruit profile to the wine, and in leaner vintages in Bordeaux it would make the wine, I think, a lot more complete if you had the Syrah in there. So you get that lovely aromatic intensity, and you get this sort of spice and licorice coming out, and then you've got the structure and body coming from the Cabernet, which could be often just a bit lean on its own. So I think, again, this is a very successful blend on there. I like it very much.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you. Yes, and I think the sense of going to South Africa for Medlanzin was sense of freedom, because of course in France everything is regimented by the AOC, by the appellation bodies, and yes, she wanted to make some Chardonnay. Yes, she didn't want to shy through putting some Syrah, because as you say, Annette, it does complete the wine. So this is all this sense of freedom that was released at Glenelly, to use things that she was not allowed to use. So yeah, we love the Estate Reserve. It's just an amazing value for money wine. And of course, every year you will have a different blend, because the blend will be dictated by Mother Nature and the year, and how the barrel will advance as we go through. And see like a perfume, what percentage will fit best the vintage, without making the vintage completely different than it should be. So I think now we can move on to the Lady May. So I'm gonna remove the because I don't have a particular slide for each wine, so I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen, because after this there is not much, and we'll just go vintage by vintage.
Okay, sorry, Leah, there's another question coming from Annette, and the question is, when do you blend, prior or after maturation?
Oh yes, I forgot to mention this. So the blending is always happening after maturation. So we'll have, first of all, we'll harvest. For all of our wine, we'll harvest with the parcel individually. After this, it will be again unsorted. At the fermentation, each parcel will be fermented individually, and then the same wine will go in different kind of barrel, different continents, maybe different kind of barrel as well, different smokiness of the barrel, and then after this we do the blend. So for us, we're trying to create as many components, and then we do the blend after all of this. Okay, so let's move on to the Lady May, unless there are other questions, Emerson.
No, we don't have any question. We can proceed with the Lady May.
Okay, so Lady May, we'll go through 2015, 2012, 2010, and 2008. As I say, we have our library for good for the 2008, because we just don't have enough wine. So we will not export 2008 anymore. But I think it's a good exercise just to see how the winery is doing over the years. 2017 is our next good vintage, but 2015 is some of our best vintage to date. So if we look at how we make the wine, so again, not all year is the same blend, and you will notice this as we go through the wine. I will explain the different blend, and then it's a selection of parcel. The Lady May is always the highest percentage of Cabernet Sauvignon. You know, Cabernet Sauvignon is what we're all about. Cabernet Sauvignon is also the reflection, the best Cabernet Sauvignon really sucks of all the terroir around, so it's really the best reflection of what we are about. And of course, it's the way we used to make wine in Pauillac. So we try to replicate this. We're not trying to replicate what we used to make, but we're trying to use the knowledge that we've got with Mother Nature at hand and what we have in South Africa. I've mentioned already the parcel. So in terms of the way we make the wine and how we proceed, it's a little bit like the estate reserve. We're gonna lightly crush the wine, the grape. The natural fermentation will occur in tank, and then we will leave 2 to 3 weeks skin contact, and then move in 300 liters barrel to have the malolactic fermentation happening. We will rack in general every 3 to 4 months, and then we will bottle. I forgot to mention with the estate reserve and as well as the Lady May, we do not do any filtration since 2012, so the wine are completely vegan. But on vintage 2008, we did do some we did use white egg, so it's not going to be, you know, vegan friendly or vegetarian. It will be vegetarian friendly but not vegan friendly, but all the wines since 2012 have no filtration. We produce a very small amount of the Lady May, depending on the year, between 9,000 bottles to 20,000 bottles, and again, you know, it's on allocation, so it's going almost as soon as we put it on the market. So 2015, 70% of Cabernet Sauvignon. We've got 15% of Cabernet Franc, 10% of Merlot, and 5% of Petit Verdot. So we really have your usual blend on this wine. And again, 2015 is all about the fruit. So like you will find in the estate reserve, is really fruit driven. Now, the good thing about fruit driven wine is that it's really pleasing on you know, people giving scores and consumer, because it's fruit. But equally, when you will compare it, you know, with other vintage, I don't think 2015 is amazing to drink now, but it's not going to age as much as, you know, 2008 or 2012, 2010, in my opinion, just because, you know, it's already fruit driven, and you know, with the tannin are reduced, so compared to some other vintage. So amazing to drink now, can obviously age for 20-25 years, but we're trying with the Lady May to make wine that can age beyond this. And in terms of the year, you know, 2015 is your textbook year. It was cold enough to achieve dormancy. Dormancy for the vineyard is its prime for the vine to sleep and have their beauty sleeps and come back and be regenerated. And we do have snow now, you know, in our vineyard. So during our winter, which will be around July, August, we will have sometimes snow. So it is definitely cold enough. But we did have the bud break 2 weeks earlier on this wine. So we didn't harvest a little bit earlier, but really not so much to say about this harvest, because everything happened the way it should happen. We didn't have rain when we didn't need it. We didn't have, everything was just the perfect textbook vintage. And so with the perfect textbook vintage, you do have the perfect wine. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment or have any question on the 2015 before I move on to the next vintages.
Maybe we can have Annette share with us a little bit of her views.
Yes, I agree with you. I mean, obviously, I've only just tried the first one. I was going to comment when we tried all of them, but you can definitely see this really upfront Cabernet Cassis coming in there. And I hear what you're saying about whilst it will live, it won't be the most long-lived vintage because the tannins are incredibly approachable and soft now already, and the fruit's really all there. So yes, it will hold for quite a period of time, 10, 15 years, I'm sure of that, but there's not a lot that necessarily needs to improve on it. And so it's not one of the wines that, I like it as it is at the moment. So this is the sort of wine I would prefer to drink now while the fruit is actually there.
Thank you, Annette. And yes, this is really our USP, to, again, we just putting in on the market 2015. So, we are trying to give this aging already to the buyer, to the consumer. So they have a wine that is ready and is not unapproachable. But yeah, it is not, because it is so ready to drink and so good now, sadly, it's not going to age as much as all our other Lady May. So it's a double thinking with this great vintage.
Okay, so we have another question, and the question is coming from Mr. Haosheng, and the question is, why no Merlot in some years of the Lady May? Merlot should be quite robust against different weather conditions across vintages.
Yes. So first of all, with the wine that we're gonna try today, there is a very big gap in between the vintage in a way. And yes, we're not putting Merlot in every year because Merlot brings the softness to the wine as well. And, with 2015 in mind, yes, the Merlot is something you want to add. But for instance, when I will come back to it on 2008, for example, we didn't have any Merlot ready because, the Merlot was simply not performing when it was a 4-year-old vine. So we didn't put it in the blend. And then in 2010, it was still really high acidity. So we didn't want to put Merlot when actually we put a little bit, we put 5%, we started in 2010, but we didn't want to put too much of it. And then it's only then after really 2013, we started to up the Merlot. And the reason why we started to up the Merlot, it's 2 reasons. First, the vine were starting to finally perform well, but also with Chateau Pichon in mind, Merlot was a very big part of the chateau. In fact, Chateau Pichon had the highest part of Merlot in their blend. So they were really famous for this, to have this highest part of Merlot. So we only started to use Merlot a little bit later on when the vine were starting to perform better.
Hey, that's all.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to 2012. So 2012, it was actually, and it's just to say, sometimes, you've got a textbook vintage and it's amazing, but not necessarily, something that will age like really on the long run, where 2012 was a challenging year. So everything was slow, it was extremely dry, we had low temperature, we had slow shoot, the growing season was longer than usual, difficulty of ripening, and then we had spike of temperature just before the harvest, and that created stress. But then, the harvest conditions were perfect. And when we decided to harvest, which was a little bit later than usual, the physiological ripening was there and the harvest conditions were perfect. And then, that allowed us to have a very, very high quality wine. Oops, sorry, I'm just trying to... So yes, 2012 is not your textbook year, for instance, but it is a very good quality wine. And of course, with this in mind, the vine, progress with really high tannin. It's very sharp, it's very concentrated, it's very intense color. And, it's a wine that is 10 years old, but I tasted it just before COVID, and it is so intense in color still. So for me, this is really a wine that will age. You do have your black currant starting with, and then an undertone of raspberry and cedar. And in terms of the blend, here you've got a higher degree of Cabernet Sauvignon. We've got 89% of Cabernet Sauvignon, 10% Petit Verdot, and only 1% of Cabernet Franc. And sometimes people ask, yeah, but just why 1%? Why bother? But the Cabernet Franc does bring structure to the wine, and it does bring this extra tannin that you need to the wine. So to me, 2012 is obviously we're showing you some of the best vintage, but just with a different look at. But 2012 is a great vintage.
Thank you, Leah. Maybe we can do a 8, 9, 10. We do a progressive, and then we do a review on the taste.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. That's fine. So I'm moving on to 2010. 2010. The challenge with 2010 is that the previous year, in 2009, we also had drought, not as severe as 2018, but we had a drought. And so, with anything that happened with Mother Nature, with whether, it's hail or frost or drought or anything, the vine will be affected for the year after, or sometimes many years. So definitely when you have a drought in 2009, the vintage 2010 look already difficult to start with, because the vines are a bit tired, but luckily because they're young, they recover very quickly. But it was a vine stress beforehand, so we did have to put a lot of irrigation just after the harvest of 2009 to start 2010 vintage as a really great vintage. The conditions were cool as well, so again allow dormancy, but it started, we had buds a little bit later, and we had also smaller berries. But smaller berries is not always bad, because with smaller berries you can have something a little bit more concentrated. And then the rest of 2010 was good. We had a dry growing season and a dry harvesting, so we didn't have any pressure or any disease. And so that's for 2010. In terms of the blend, here you've got 90% of Cabernet Sauvignon, 5% of Petit Verdot, and 5% of Merlot. To me, 2010 was the forgotten vintage, because it took a lot of time to open. And knowing the winery from day one and used to drink the wine, it's only like 2-3 years ago, then 2010, when I tasted it two years ago, I said, well, we should definitely do something. In 2020, I said we should definitely do like a special release, 10 years of Lady May, because it showed so well. And still to this day, when I tasted it 3 weeks ago, for me, the 2010 is the one that, for me, but it's all subjective to everyone, but it's the one that drinks the best, where the wine should be. You still have the tannin, you still have the everything that you should have, but you start to have some aging character, and you start to have this sort of gamey character as well, but in a nice way, not in overpower. And of course the color, still very strong, but you start again to have a little bit of orangey color, but not too much. So again, this is the proof that the wine is opening up. And as everyone know, the wine sometimes close and shut down, and then the only way is to just constantly test them, and then be like, oh, well, this is really opening, this year, so let's do something. And this is what we did, because for me, 2010 drinks amazingly well now. So that's my take on 2010. And yeah, you've got the velvetiness as well, with the Merlot being there. And we didn't have any Cabernet Franc. on this one because the Cabernet Franc was not there yet. So, you know, we couldn't add any Cabernet Franc. I'm going to move on to 2008. So I'll let you do your little slide change. So with 2008, so this is our first vintage. And, you know, when you look at a first vintage, I think this is a good setup for the rest of, you know, the year to come. Because, of course, first vintage is the panic, is the first child, you know, we've never done it before, even though, you know, we know on the book how it should be. And, you know, you just don't know what to expect. And you know, the expectation will only live through when you taste, you know, so many years later and be like, well, okay, that was our first vintage, but it's still holding on quite well. And, you know, with 2008, you know, it's obviously holding on quite well, despite the fact that, you know, we didn't have all of our grape ready. That's why on this one, you've got 91% of Cabernet Sauvignon and 9% of Petit Verdot, you know, only to grape. But I think, you know, it sets really the tone for the rest. You can see the label where it was different as well. We changed the label, I think it was 2016. So for all of the wine. And this is the original Lady May label. So you have the statue, and you still have it on the new label, but in gold. And that was a very famous artist that gave this to Med Langzin for a wedding. So we have the statue at the winery, and this is the picture of it. 2008, very cool year. Rain on and off, early summer, so not great. You know, we were, you know, on the top of being the first vintage, that was really a panicking cause for Luc. So with the rain in mind, you had also loose bunch. But, you know, again, despite this, the fruit, they were amazing quality. So instead of putting fruit again, you know, of the other grape that were not quite qualitative enough for us, we decided to just put those two grape. And only 9,000 bottles, that was our first production. So the smallest one, only 9,000 bottles were produced. So as I said, I think it's a treat, even for us when we taste 2008 is a treat, you know, because we know we don't have much left on the library. Again, a vintage that is holding on very well. Yes, you do have more of an orangey color than obviously 2010, despite the fact that, you know, it's very close, but, you know, it's the first vintage. I think, you know, for the first vintage, it's amazing and it's still holding on very well. So yes, I hope that, you know, the fact that, you know, you were able to do the tasting of different years, show you the quality of Glenelly, show you where we come from, a little bit of our history, you know, I didn't miss what we missed in some years, what we added in some other year. And, you know, we constantly, you know, every year is a new year and every year we're trying for better. So, and I'm sure it's the case for everyone else. So yeah, I hope that was interesting and that you had fun about it, because wine is about having fun as well.
Okay, Leah, there's a message coming from Haosheng, and then he says, congratulations to May Elaine, going to pass the century mark in only 3 years. Super. And there's another question coming from Nicola. The question is, she wanted to find out about global warming, basically. You have acknowledged that there is a water climate issue in South Africa. So the wines she just tasted are so delicious with lovely fresh fruit on the palate. The wines are also incredibly well balanced. What is Glenelly's plan to handle the effect of global warming on their wines? And do they see their style changing as a result of global warming?
So I always like to speak, you know, the good thing about the winemaker in South Africa is they work all together. So it's an issue at Glenelly, but it's an issue which is much more important in the Swartland, where it's really dry already. I mean, literally in 2018, 2018 was the year, if people don't know about it, it was the year in January when I arrived, is the first year that Cape Town water was closed. So you were reusing, you only could take like one shower and then you reuse the water from your shower for the toilet. And then, you know, it was just crazy. And no, you didn't wash your hair, you were just bath in the sea. And, you know, it was really, really crazy. But also, not everyone had a water shortage because it depends what water container everyone was plugged in a way, because if your water arrivage was from Cape Town, then yes, you had no water. But we were lucky enough, and most of new winery are quite lucky because quite often they are linked to a natural water source, which those natural water sources were not, you know, off. But with this in mind, you know, you have to be extremely careful to your irrigation. And, you know, people are looking at alternative like in Australia, where you desalinate water if you need the water. And that's for everything. It's not only for wine, it's for kettle, it's for fruit farms, veg farm. So this is how we're trying to tackle the water shortage. And then on the other side, there is, on the top of this, global warming, which it's not only the water shortage, but lots of other issues. Now, before this, South Africa didn't have really, you know, massive vintage variation. And now we see vintage variation, but I would say we are not affected with global warming in our vintage variation as much as France, for example, with the ale, you know, like you really have your vineyard destroyed. I think in South Africa, yes, oh, well, it's going to snow. Yes, it's not normal to snow, but we will have dormancy in our vineyards. So, you know, that's a positive thing. So we are not as affected as the rest of the world with global warming, you know, as European vineyard. But with the water shortage, you know, there is definitely something that is being done, desalinized water, and different way of getting your water. But of course, you know, it's a scary thing, and you know, no one could predict COVID, and no one can predict, you know, what's going to be the next thing with the problem with global warming. So we hope, you know, we're not gonna get to the bottom, but we definitely not. I would be lying if I was saying, oh yes, we're super affected by global warming. At the moment, we are not as affected as most vineyards, you know, in the northern hemisphere.
Thank you, Leah. I thought maybe I would like to invite Annette again, just to give us a little bit of her opinions on how she finds that mini vertical on Lady May.
Well, first of all, both to you, Alice Winecleek, and to Leah as well, what a treat, actually, getting to try these side by side. I've tried a lot of these vintages individually, sort of on their own, but it's so lovely and rare to have the opportunity to see them all side by side. And they are really truly delicious wines, which, you know, which shows the real, not the potential, because the potential's there, but it shows the real quality that we can have with South African wines and South African Bordeaux blends on there. I found them all absolutely, you know, really a treat to try. I understand what you say about the 10 being your favourite at the moment, but I have to say I'm quite partial to the 12 myself.
Actually. Yeah, yes.
The tannin structure is quite different between the 10 and the 12. The 10, even though it's had more maturity, the tannins are still a little bit more chunky in their style. Whereas in 12, I was going to ask you what changed in the winemaking. The tannins for Cabernet are so fine and elegant, and fine and elegant isn't usually a word I use for sort of Cabernet blends. That's usually something more I'm using for Burgundian styles, or, you know, some even very good Syrahs and things, but very rarely used for Cabernet. So, I mean, I think just the freshness on the 12 and those beautiful tannins are just incredible. I mean, I think that wine I think has got a long, long way ahead of it. I mean, it's really, really has. You know, when you compare it to the 15, I mean, I'd love to try that again in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. It's got a big future ahead of it. But all of them have been absolutely wonderful to try, and to try the 8 as well. I mean, the first vintage is a real treat for everybody who's got the samples here. So thank you, and thank everyone, you know, at Wine Clique for making that possible. But a really, really enjoyable tasting.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. Yeah. So I must say that really wonderful training with the conversation with Leah, and the winery graciously opened up the library, the cellars. We said that we wanted to give the experience our Singapore clients on the evolution and the development of Lady May, and that's how we got a bottle of the 2008 in front of us, together with the vertical vintages. And thank you, Leah.
Thank you. And thank you, Emerson, for, the communication and organizing the tasting. And of course, thank you, Alice, for believing in us and, starting the importation of Glenelly in Singapore. Singapore is a place I love going to. So I will be the first one in a plane whenever we can travel, and hopefully meet some of you in real and go around and taste more wine together.
Yeah, we look forward to
Alice,
that.
if I could just say one more word, I was going to say to everybody in the audience, drink more South African wines, drink these wines. The South African wine industry sadly has been battered the most through COVID, with all of the lockdowns, and out of every wine producing country in the world, South Africa has suffered the most. And I think you would agree with that, Area. I mean, it's been a really difficult time. I've got friends who are winemakers out there as well, and it's just been tough. And this is really the time, if you're going to spend out on money on wines, put your hand in the pocket and support South Africa.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Anna, to make, we don't like to be the crying lambs, but it's true that, South Africa have been, on the top of COVID, like everyone else. We didn't have any help from the government to retain staff. And so, we were really relying on our own income. And also, 4 times we had a complete stop of selling alcohol in our local market. And that means 40%, we export 60 to 70%. So that was 30 to 40% just gone from one day to another. So it has been tough. It's still tough because right now, again, we were just back to tourism. People were starting to come. And last week, with this South African variant, all plane have been stopped. So again, we're not going to have any tourists coming into our beautiful tasting room. And that's the shame, because I think when people visit South Africa, they really then, really become attracted to the wine and the lifestyle and everything that it has to offer.
Well, I think with this, I hope once the airspace is opened, we can invite you to Singapore, and likewise for us and all our participants in Singapore to fly over to South Africa to meet the team, to meet the people behind it, and to enjoy the beautiful landscape and the beautiful wines. So I will end this session, and thank you everyone again. Thank you for everybody's time, and we had a beautiful day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Leah. Thanks everyone.
Bye everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.